Don't speak! The words cut through the night like a blade. A command, not from a soldier, not from a general, but from the last voice anyone expected. A homeless black girl, no older than 7, standing barefoot on the cracked pavement of the city streets. She had no home, no food, no riches. Yet in that moment, her trembling whisper carried more power than the decorated men who walked past her every day. The city was alive with noise, cars roaring, lights flashing, people rushing. But in the shadows of that chaos, the child's ears caught something no one else noticed. A whisper, a plan, a secret meant to remain hidden. And it wasn't just any secret. It was a plot to take the life of a man who carried stars on his chest, the weight of a nation on his shoulders, a 4-star general, aged 55, silver hair cropped short, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a decorated military uniform with polished medals, glinting under the streetlights. He was power. He was respect. Soldiers saluted him, leaders listened to him, and enemies feared him. Yet, for all his strength and authority, he had no idea that danger stalked him that night. None of his guards heard it. None of his men sensed it, but the homeless girl did. Her dark brown skin reflected dimly in the glow of a street lamp, her clothes torn and patched, her small hands clutched around a half-broken toy she carried everywhere. She had nothing, but she had the one gift the general lacked, the instinct to listen where no one else cared to. She froze, her heart hammering as the whisper grew clearer. Plans of betrayal, words of death, spoken just steps away from the decorated man. She wanted to run, to hide, to vanish into the dark alleys like she always did. But then she looked at him, the general, standing tall, proud, unaware that the night was hunting him. Something inside her refused to stay silent. She stepped forward, her voice trembling yet strong enough to command, "Don't speak!" Every soldier turned, every head snapped toward the child. Confusion and disbelief etched on their faces. Who was this little girl to interrupt? Who was she to dare? But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that the words she carried would decide life or death. The general frowned, his authority rising. But before he could speak, her small hand lifted, pointing into the shadows. Her eyes widened with urgency. Her voice, small but fierce, rose above the hum of the street. "They're listening. They're waiting for you." And in that instant, the man who commanded armies, who faced wars without flinching, felt something he hadn't felt in decades: fear. The general's soldiers moved instantly, forming a wall of muscle and steel around their commander. Their boots slammed against the pavement, their rifles raised, their eyes locked on the child who dared to interrupt. "Stand down." "Little one," barked one of the guards. A soldier in his early 30s, muscular build, buzz-cut hair, olive-green uniform sharp and clean, his jaw tight with discipline. His words carried the bite of authority. But the girl didn't move. She stood barefoot, her torn shirt hanging loose over her frail frame, her big dark eyes fixed on the shadows. Her breath trembled. Yet her voice cut sharper than any weapon. "If he speaks, if you speak, they'll know where you are." The general, 55 years old, tall, silver-haired, his chest heavy with ribbons of honor, stared at her. His instinct screamed to dismiss her, to step past this absurd interruption. He had survived ambushes, wars, betrayals. He trusted his men, his training, his judgment. And yet, there was something in her eyes. Something unshakable. Something real. The silence that followed was unbearable. The soldiers shifted, restless, exchanging doubtful looks. One scoffed under his breath. A younger soldier, 28 years old, lean frame, short brown hair, his hand clenching the strap of his rifle. "General, she's a child. Just ignore her." But then it happened. From the shadows, a metallic glint, the faint crackle of a radio, a voice muffled but sharp. "Target in sight. Awaiting confirmation." The soldiers froze. The general's eyes narrowed, and the homeless girl's chest heaved as she pointed again, her tiny finger trembling toward the darkness. She had heard it before they had. She had saved him before he even knew he was in danger. The general lifted his hand, signaling his men to hold position. His voice, low and steady, carried the weight of command. "Search the perimeter." His guards spread into the night, boots pounding against the wet pavement. Every second ticked like thunder in the girl's small heart. She wanted to run, to hide, but she didn't. Not tonight. Tonight she refused to disappear. The general turned back to her, his gray eyes piercing. How did you hear that? His voice cracked with disbelief. The girl swallowed hard. I always listen because nobody listens to me. And in those words, the man who had commanded thousands felt something stir inside him. Respect. Before he could answer, chaos erupted, shouts, gunfire, the clash of steel in the alley. The enemy had been found. Ambushers dragged from the shadows, their faces twisted in shock at being discovered. The soldiers overpowered them, their plans shattered. The general's men returned, dragging masked figures into the light, and every pair of eyes turned, not to their commander, but to the small girl who had heard what they hadn't. The general stood tall, but for the first time his pride bowed low. He looked at her with awe and whispered under his breath, words that none of his men had ever heard him say, "You saved me." But little did they know, the night wasn't over. This was only the beginning, because the whisper she heard spoke of something even greater. The night was heavy with smoke and whispers of betrayal. The captured men knelt on the ground, their weapons seized, their faces masked with failure, yet their silence was louder than the gunfire had been. Something about it gnawed at the general. A 55-year-old man, tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair catching the faint light of the street lamps. His decorated uniform marked with honor, but now shadowed by unease. The soldiers surrounded him, alert and tense. One 30 years old, muscular, with dark skin and a shaved head, sweat gleaming across his brow beneath his helmet, leaned close. "General, we should move. It's not safe to stay here." The girl didn't move. Only 7 years old, small, thin, her dark brown skin lit by the flickering streetlight, her tattered shirt and bare feet telling of hunger and nights on cold concrete. She stood between the general and the darkness, trembling but unbroken. Her eyes widened suddenly. She pressed a finger to her lips again and whispered, "Don't speak." The soldiers froze, confused. Then they heard it. Static, another radio signal, a second group. Voices carried low through the night. The first team failed. "Move in, kill the target." The general's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the hilt of his ceremonial dagger. This wasn't just an ambush, it was an operation. A trap far deeper than they had realized. His men scanned the rooftops, the alleys, the shadows, searching desperately. But the girl? She didn't search. She listened. Her small head tilted, her body turning like a compass needle, until she pointed toward a boarded-up building across the street. Her voice cracked, but her words were steel. "They're in there." The general's heart thundered. How could a child, frail and forgotten, have sharper instincts than men trained for war? He raised his hand, signaling silence. His soldiers, men in their late 20s to early 30s, each one hardened, scarred, and disciplined, their olive-green uniforms brushing against heavy rifles, spread like shadows across the street, boots pressed softly into gravel, breath slowed. Every movement was precision. And then it exploded. Gunfire tore through the night. Bullets ricocheted off steel. Flames licked from shattered windows, and shouts roared into the air. The enemy unleashed their fury, but they had been seen before they were ready. The general's men surged forward, overpowering them, dragging them from their hiding places one by one. The girl stood frozen, her tiny hands pressed against her ears, tears streaking her dirt-covered face. Yet her eyes never left the general. She had heard what no one else could. And now, the most powerful man on that street owed his life to her silence. When the final shot echoed into nothingness, the city fell quiet again. The ambushers lay bound, the danger extinguished. Soldiers caught their breath, their muscles trembling, their eyes wide with disbelief. The general turned slowly. His chest heaved, his metals rattled faintly, and then his gaze fell upon the little girl. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, to the astonishment of his men, he bent down. His voice, usually thunder on a battlefield, broke into a whisper. "Child, you saved me. You saved us all." The men who had followed him into countless wars, men who had never seen him bow, never seen him falter, watched, as their leader lowered his head to a barefoot girl from the streets. She blinked, clutching the lollipop she had found earlier, her voice barely audible. "I just listened." And with those words, the general felt something he hadn't in decades. Not victory, not survival, but humility. Because sometimes, the most powerful lessons do not come from weapons, medals, or rank. They come from the smallest, most overlooked voices. Voices the world ignores until the night they rise and save a life. That night, in the silence between chaos and survival, a legend was born.